Well, darn, I didn't bring my chalice with me. So I'm going to light a virtual chalice.
I have one.
Oh, there you go. Great. Pat has a chalice at right there. I used to keep one close to my computer, but I haven't done that lately. And I want to, as we light the chalice, I just want to hold you as leaders and board members of your congregation in the highest regard. Your job is a hard job. Sometimes it feels like you're alone, and we want you to know that you're not alone, which is why we're doing this series. So with that, let's get started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we need to do a little quick tech review? Are folks familiar or comfortable with the Zoom platform?
Yeah, I think we should do a tech review. We have some new people on here. So there should be, if you hover your mouse over your upper right-hand window of your video, there's a little dialogue where you can mute or unmute. I don't think we have hand-raising capability here in this one, do we? We do. That, yeah, if you raise your hand, we'll be able to see you. That always works. You can also rename yourself. I renamed you Laura, so I gave you a first name.
Thanks.
And it's down at the bottom, lower left-hand side, there's also a place where you can mute and unmute yourself. We can also mute you. Pat and I can. Sometimes we'll do that. So Blaine, for example, we have muted you. I'm going to unmute you right now. You can, if you're on the phone, you can *6, I believe, to mute and unmute. But we'll, with a small enough group, we'll just keep everybody unmuted. And there's also a place where you can stop your video. So like, sometimes if I'm going to sneeze or something, I'll stop my video and then start it again. Or feel free to do that, as you need to. There's also a place, the important part, there's a little, in the center at the bottom, there's some different things you can do, and there's a chat box, and we're going to have you type something into the chat box. And if you have a question during when someone else is talking, we'll monitor that chat box and we'll refer to it. Or if your audio's not, or your your microphone's not working well, you can type things into that chat box. And let's see, we are since it's a smaller group, we're going to record, and it's mostly discussion, this live webinar. So, if there's something personal or something shared, we can cut that out. But the idea is we are in a covenantal situation where you're free to share the learnings from the webinar, but not the specific stories from other congregations, unless you've been given permission to share. And I think that is it. There's another button that says share down there. That's to share our screens. There might be a time when we ask you to share your screen, like maybe at a later webinar, and I'm going to share my screen for a little bit during part of this one. But for the most part, we won't be using that function. Anything else you want to add to that, Pat?
No, I think you got it, Renee. So we want to just take a few minutes for introductions. And we all have our names on our squares, so I don't think we're going to do individual introductions. What we kind of wanted to do was get a sense of who was in the room and sort of size of your congregation, whether you're a president or a vice president, where you might be located, that kind of thing. So is there anybody from a congregation over 300? And if you are not on video, you could unmute and tell us. If you're on video, you can just raise your hand. Anybody over 300?
Yes, our congregation is about 450.
Okay, and that's Arlington?
No, it's Beacon.
You're a Beacon. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Hi, this is Lyle Mazard from Arlington. And yes,
I knew they were in the house.
You knew there was Arlington in the house. And we are over 1,000, but about, I would
Wow.
say, a little over 800 active participants.
Great, great. How about smaller congregations, maybe 100 or less? Are there folks from smaller congregations? Or what's a roughly?
We're about 85 members right now. I'm in Canandaigua, New York. We are.
Do you have a minister serving you?
We do. We have a half-time minister.
Okay. All right. Jamestown?
We have about 40, 45, I think, last count. And we do not have a minister. And Jamestown is about an hour south of Buffalo, just north of the Pennsylvania line.
Is that where the Lucille Ball Museum is?
That is where the Lucille Ball Museum is and the National Comedy Center.
Oh,
So
that's great. I've worked for the region for many years, and that's a place I haven't gotten, so I must get there. And so how about in the middle? So somewhere more than 100, but less than maybe 300. Does that cover you, Kent?
Yeah, Kent. Yeah, we have about 200 right around there.
Okay. So great. So we have a really good kind of a diverse perspective just in the room right now. So, and the interesting thing, of course, about serving a board in a congregation of 100, 200, 300, 1,000 is that there are things that are clearly different, but there are many things that are very much the same. So I think that there's probably more in common than we think with congregations of different size. So, so I know that Kent and Canandaigua and Jamestown, kind of on the western side of our Central East region, and Arlington and Morristown are kind of on the eastern side. So we have also representation from some different geographical areas, and congregations can be culturally very different. They have, if they're in an urban area, if they're in a suburban area, if they're in a rural area, or different states. And our region actually covers, I think, 9 states. We have pieces of 9 states, not 9 complete states, and the District of Columbia. So we have a pretty good reach. Do folks, and if you want to, my voice is dropping, thank you. Having a little volume problem. Do folks have non-UU board experience? Is there anybody who'd like to share about non-Unitarian Universalist experience?
So for example, if you served like on a school PTA or something like that as well?
Yeah, I do. I've served as the president of the Parents Association on 2 school boards in the past. Not currently serving.
Did I see your hand, Laura?
I have zero.
Oh,
Zero. That would be none.
Excellent.
This is Lila, same here, zip.
Zip, okay.
And I didn't quite hear the question.
Yes, sorry. My microphone, I've been having some difficulty. Just asking if you had board experience outside of a Unitarian Universalist congregation, a co-op or a school board or a PTA, something else.
No, just kind of board work on a local piano technician group
Okay,
in the Cleveland area.
great. Well, thank you all. So we have a pretty diverse set of experiences and perspectives here. So I think that will make for some lively conversation. So I think Renee and I were going to take a moment to introduce ourselves. We know some of you, not all of you. My name is Pat Infanti, and I am part of the Central East Regional staff. and I am a primary contact, mostly kind of in the 95 corridor between Philadelphia and New York City. So I serve congregations in New Jersey, which is where I live. So I serve as a primary contact. I also support congregations in the areas of stewardship and faith development and safety. So, Renee.
Excellent. So yeah, Pat and I were two of the 3 first regional staff that were hired. So we've worked together 9+ years, and Pat's been doing the work a lot longer than that. She was with the Joseph Priestley District before that, doing all sorts of other things. So even though those are her portfolios, she has a lot more to offer than those things. So I'm Renee Rahutsky. I live in Kent, Ohio, and I serve the congregations as primary contact in Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area, and Western New York, over to Rochester, and I think Canandaigua might be my furthest east congregation that I serve. My main leadership, or my main portfolio, is leadership development, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. I also I was also a lay leader, and so I had signed the membership book in, I think, February, and I was the moderator of my congregation in June. So part of what my call to ministry is to help lay leaders be awesome, because it was a huge learning curve for me, and I was so hungry for resources. So that's what I've been trying to do, is help to create resources and make opportunities so that folks who are serving on boards won't be as lost in the wilderness the way I was when I was a leader. Let's see, and so with that, I want to share a little bit about this board, Building a Better Board series, and the online resources that we have. Did all of you get a chance to do some of the reading and things on the homework before this? It's okay if you didn't. You know, you're not going to get an F on your homework thing. But I'm curious to see how much we want to go over things, or if you had a chance to look at the materials. So how many of you had a chance? A little bit.
I did a thorough job of, a few months ago. So today I just sort of looked at the pictures to remind myself. So I have a sense of the material, but it's not fresh.
Okay, that's fair enough.
We have been trying to implement the Hotchkiss model of governance and ministry. So I've read his book. And I skimmed most of the rest of the material.
Okay. Yeah, the Hotchkiss book is the second edition, I hope. That's been very helpful, and it really has informed a lot of my understanding about board work versus ministry, and separating those two things out.
Good, because I'm thoroughly confused in that.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I want to just talk a little bit about the board training that you're doing and how that fits into all the other resources that we have. So let me share. There we go. So this is the landing page for Leader Lab, which is going to be, or is the part of the UUA website where we are hosting all the leadership development resources. It's going to change in a month or so, the structure of it, but all these parts will be there. It's just that they'll be located a little bit differently. So what you are working out of is this board member training here in the center. But we also have another bunch of robust resources in what's called the Congregational Handbook. And I'm going to click on that and just give you an idea. So the board member training are things you need to know as a board member, but the Congregational Handbook has all the content of things that you all, like might also need to know as a board member, but in more depth. So there's more here around covenant, there's more here around conflict. You can get to our safe congregation section here. There's a whole section on mission, vision, and covenant. We have a whole new section on finance for your finance folks, but there's a lot of articles in there that might be helpful. And then we also have a whole section on governance. We're going to have another section on developing feedback loops also, evaluations, assessments, those sorts of things. And just to show you a little bit, going a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole here, this is the section on money. So there's all these different sections on how to segregate financial duties so you reduce the chance of embezzlement, how to samples of how to handle petty cash, a little bit about professional expenses for your professional staff, creating a budget, purpose-based budget. Blaine from Kent might recognize some of the graphics here because Kent already does this. Anyway, so these are some of the resources that we have on in this Leader Lab section. And the other thing we have is this search for leadership resources. And if you've ever used Worship Web, this is a very similar kind of setup where you can look for a category like change and conflict, and you can look for an author. We'll look for Connie Goodbread, I think. Well, maybe I won't do an author this time, but you can, if you have like a certain, like I remember seeing a workshop and I really liked the way they did this, you can do a search on different leadership resources. So pretty much everything that we have in the board section that you're taking and other parts of the Leader Lab are all articles in here. So if you can find them through the, going through the board section, but you can also find a lot of those articles here. Like I think this levels of conflict might be in part of the board section. So anyway, this is just this, and we're constantly adding to this library. So I just wanted to share that with you because what often happens is you'll like, oh, I need something, and go there first, or send an email to your primary contact and we can help you find something. But again, the idea is to have as many resources for you all as possible. And so, and then the board member training, of course, you've been to. There is the downloadable syllabus that you can print off. So if you want to jump around, you can just mark off what you've seen and not seen. And the other thing I want to say about this, I'm glad that you're doing this and participating in these webinars. But what we're hearing around the country from all of our colleagues is that boards who have done this have been able to up their effectiveness as a board, like to the next level. So that there's a lot more understanding about what the role of a board is. So you're not spending as much time doing things that are not the board's work, and you don't get pulled into communication mishaps which turn into conflicts. There's just a lot more, lot less wheel spinning and a lot more good time that you spend together. The board meetings, tend to not last as long and that sort of thing. So we've had this out for almost 2 years and we've had really good feedback on it. So that's it for the commercial. Any questions or any problems that any of you have had with navigating the website? Excellent.
So, so we're gonna spend a little bit of time just sort of giving you some opportunities to kind of share about what's happening in your own context. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking, kind of going over some of the more challenging pieces of the content, just to kind of check that your understanding is where you need it to be. So the first thing I want to do is I want to what is working for you in your board meetings now, and feel free to raise your hand and share briefly, or share in the chat box. The chat box would be great too. So what's working well for you now? So this will help us to do a little bit of diagnosis around maybe kind of where you need where we really need to focus. So.
Well, I guess what's working for us, we have a 9-member board with a 3-member leadership team. We have 2 called ministers and an executive director, all of whom sit in on our board meetings. We have recently moved to a consent agenda type of scenario because our board meetings do tend to be quite lengthy. We keep trying to cut it down, but we're in the midst of process of attempting to build a new sanctuary next door to our current building. That takes up an enormous amount of time. Not that we're doing that ourselves. We have a task force, but there's a constant need for approval and votes and things as we move forward with that. And we just have so many other things going on in that it just always feels like there's major things to discuss and things that are going to take too much time to discuss. So then we end up saying, well, let's have a separate deep dive meeting about that particular thing. And so lately, I think we've all been feeling like, we might as well move in and, just sleep there.
So if I ask the question, what would you like to change? It sounds like you'd like some shorter meetings or some skills or some tools for really helping to get the meetings more focused.
Yep. Yeah. And like I mentioned, we are trying to live into or move into the Hotchkiss model of governance, but we're certainly not there yet.
Yeah, it takes learning. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle. Anybody else want to share what's working or what you might like to change? Blaine says, using the words "we are getting in the weeds" a bit here gets people focused. That's good, Blaine. Yeah.
So this is Lila. I'm new to our board this year. We are in a major period of flux. So we are in search for a new senior minister, following a period of tumult and a lot of pain on the part of our congregation following the departure of our last senior minister. We are embarking on moving toward a collaborative governance model and away from policy governance, which we have found, I don't know whether, it's a chicken or an egg thing, whether or not it was the policy governance that didn't fit us or we weren't doing policy governance the way it was supposed to be done. But we've just adopted the 8th principle, so we're in the process of figuring out how we can sort of build that into our congregation. So, there's a lot going on, but in terms of our board, one of the most interesting things with this year's board is that we have gone from being majority white male to majority female, with a fair, not racial diversity, but we have at least sort of broadened our perspectives on our board. So things that are working well, we've implemented a number of mechanisms for not talking over one another, and established, I think, some pretty good relationships and sort of vehicles. We use I can't remember the word for it. We have a process monitor in our meetings now that gives us feedback on how we're doing as a team and how our meetings go. We have an executive committee, but then we also meet in executive session after our meetings to kind of go over the more sensitive things. So it's an exciting time to be a part of our board, but there's also just
there's a lot of complexity there.
There's a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
We're about to embark on a capital campaign.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. Well, good. Well, hopefully we can help you navigate some of the resources that will be most important to you in this particular moment.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Laura, how about how's your board working? Is it working well, or are there things you'd like to see change?
Well, our board is pretty inexperienced. This is my second year on a board, and I'm the board president. So, because we didn't have any hands raised for that job. The VP is also a brand new new to our church. He's been experienced on other boards, but he's still new to the church and new to UU. Our treasurer has been around for quite a long time, so I rely on him a lot for some guidance and some support. But I would say that right now our board is young. They feel overstretched, too busy. We moved from a 7-member board last year and in a congregational vote to a 5-member board, which I and Renee gave us some suggestions on that, and I do think it right-sized our board, but we still have some resistance and some comments about that. We've got a solid base in our congregation of people who have been with the church for a very long time, that are tired and don't necessarily want to do the work that they've been doing for years. I don't necessarily blame them at all for that. And we do have a half-time minister who's young. She's not ordained yet, so she's still figuring things out as well. She's also right now on maternity leave. She just had her second child, so she's actually absent for the next 6 weeks or so. So we're kind of in this place where I'm a decisive, get things done kind of person, but also very busy. And I would love some coaching and some guidance. It'd be great if it was within the church. And I'm also not able to go to church every Sunday. So there's sometimes some communication issues. There's just misunderstandings sometimes, and there's expectations that need to be more clarified. So I've just got a few goals this year as the board president. I'd like to make the job, as I've said, I hate to say it this way, but I'm going to say it. Truth be told, I say, I want to make being on the board suck less so that people would be willing to do it. and that's one of my major goals. Work on communication, and we have a basement renovation project that is actually half done right now. So I'd like to finish that. Those are my only goals this year. But making the job suck less is my primary goal, really, so that people want to do this.
That's great. That's wonderful. I think you're not the only congregation that might frame the work in that way. So it's real talk with Laura.
I'm kind of a direct communicator.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll talk about communication, I think, in a couple sessions down the road, and talk about some good skill building you can do there for others.
That's why I love working with you, Laura.
Yeah. Tom, do you want to just share for a couple minutes about sort of what's working well with your board and something that you think might need to be changed?
We have a lot of the same concerns as Canandaigua, being a small congregation. The board seems to be working fairly well, at least among ourselves. We have 3 new board members with little experience, so they're kind of ramping up what their responsibilities are. One of the things we did last year that I think is very effective is, prior to last year, everybody was responsible for everything and nothing got done. And so we have 7 board members. We defined 7 areas of responsibility, like communications, membership, worship, finances. And then each board member got one of those areas, and then we defined the responsibilities, core responsibilities, and continue to refine them so that when an issue comes up or a problem comes up, we now have a responsible person that has to take it before things just fall through the cracks. So that's been fairly successful. And now it's starting to spread out to where we had too few people doing too many tasks. Now we're trying to delegate beyond that so that we know, let's say Brian is in charge of building and grounds. We know he's responsible for that, but he doesn't have to do it himself. He's able to look at this task list and start to delegate and find things. So hopefully we can continue to build on that. The other issue is communications. It's hard to get, even in a small congregation, it's hard to get communications out and keep everybody on the same page. The one challenge we have, we just heard within the last few weeks that our church secretary of 20 years is going to leave at the end of the year. But that's a good thing. I see that as an opportunity because one of the things I and several board members have discussed is trying to find a church administrator as opposed to a secretary and take on a lot more of that responsibility. So that transition is going to be a challenge for us to both define it and then to sell it to the congregation so that we can finance that person.
Great.
So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, and you lifted up another board as employer is another significant challenge for boards, and we'll get to that in a couple of sessions as well. So thank you. Blaine, did you want to share anything about what's working well in your board meetings and something you'd like to see change?
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, our board, I believe, is really cruising well this year. But we have also, similar to other places, I guess, 3 on. We have 9 total, so 3 on every year for 3 years. And this year we've got 2 former moderators actually that are new on the board this year. So we're quite well stocked with people that know the history and the traditions of our church, which I think is beneficial, especially since we have a new minister. Stephen Protzman has been there now for just about a year, and he's pretty much he's a taskmaster, and I believe our board is doing quite well. We're moving more, the big thing this year is trying to make the bylaws, shrink them down a little bit so that there's more policy things that we can be a little more fluid with. That's going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing, hopefully, at the next congregational meeting. And we're doing better with many more lines of communication, and we're trying to get to the 7 lines of communication, apparently, which is the ideal goal, I guess. And we're about 2/3 of a way to financing a huge infrastructure, a building, a new social hall. And so right now we have a task force, which I'm a part of, which is going to be looking at building a capital campaign and a feasibility study and all the things that go along with raising a little bit more money because we came up a little short last time. So we have some big things on the slate, but I think we're doing pretty well.
That's great. That's great. And how many were on your board, Blaine?
We have 9.
9 on your board. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So we've lifted up some of the really big jobs that congregational boards have: staffing, capital campaigns, some of the other things that you all lifted up. Communication is a really big thing. So hopefully we can have some good conversation around some of these topics as we go forward. Was there anything so we're going to kind of shift now to the content. Was there anything in the modules that anybody said, wow, I didn't know that was really surprising? And feel free to put something in the chat at this point that moves us along just a little bit more quickly. And I see Renee has posted some resources for administrators. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a professional organization for UU administrators, and they have sample job descriptions and stuff there, and also some other resources. So,
so yeah, if you have any thoughts on, you know, anything in the module that was surprising, or if there are questions that you kind of have that you're bringing, put those in the chat box so that we can kind of sort through those and make sure that we get to them. If not tonight, then at a night coming up. So Renee, do we want to move to the content questions? I'm looking at the clock.
yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So this is a quiz, maybe.
Maybe.
A very informal quiz. Oh, were you saying something, Blaine?
I said, oh no, a quiz.
I know, a quiz. Well, one of the things that I didn't really understand about a board is we had fiduciary responsibilities. That just wasn't part of my understanding. I knew the board voted on things and there was a budget involved, but I'm wondering, so what do you know about the fiduciary responsibilities of a board of trustees? And this is pretty much true of any board, not just church boards.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some fiduciary responsibilities? Just name one.
Balanced budget.
Yep, making sure the finances are in order. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a balanced budget, though. So Kent has a thing in their bylaws where they're supposed to have a balanced budget, but that's an unusual provision. Most congregations don't have that. And yeah, yeah, financial management, absolutely. Or make sure you have enough money to pay for things. Sometimes congregations have a growth budget, so they might budget more than they, you know, we don't really talk about this really deeply in the board training, but there is this balance between, you know, congregations are not the same as businesses. And so how we think of, you know, the income really is dependent on the generosity of your people, and that can vary widely. There's things you can do to encourage more generous giving, but often the pledged amount of money is on the conservative end of things, and then there's non-pledged money and other sorts of fundraisers and things like that. So we tend to be very conservative when it comes to income. And then we don't want to, you know, have expenses that go over the income. So anyway, it's just it's a way of thinking that congregational growth happens and financial growth happens when congregations are vibrant. And I describe it as having a buzz on Sunday morning. There's some congregations you go in and you feel a sense of excitement and you want to be there. It's the room where it's happening, right? And other congregations you go in and it just kind of feels And so, you know, part of us as leaders, we want to have exciting, vibrant places, and that will help us to grow. But, you know, how do we quantify that? It's hard to quantify that on a spreadsheet. Let's see, what else do we, oh, go ahead.
Something that we've always keep in mind with fiduciary responsibility is maintaining the reputation of the congregation, and also things like insurance, and, you know, making sure that we're covered from a legal standpoint as well as a monetary standpoint. There's a lot
Awesome.
of that.
So insurance, having safety policies, having, you know, doing your due diligence around making sure that your physical plant is in good condition. Yeah. Maintaining UUA certification. You get those pesky emails every January. I have to say the Central East region has the best return rate for certification, partially because we send you those pesky emails. But let's see, insurance, yeah. Yeah, drawing from the endowment, and if you're lucky enough to have an endowment, how you interact with that.
This is Lila. I'd say probably one of our biggest challenges and something that we're focusing a lot on right now is transparency. And ensuring that over the course, during our congregational meetings and when we're talking about budgeting and plans for doing a capital campaign to eliminate our mortgage, that everyone feels like they have the information they need and that and that there isn't anything being hidden from the congregation.
Yep. Yep. Really good communication. That really is part of your reputation as leaders in the congregation. The more the congregation trusts the leadership, that also has a positive impact on giving. So, and planned giving, Blaine says, yeah, there's a lot of the wealth in our congregation is in the baby boomer generation. And a lot of our congregations are finding that, they're starting to pass away or move away to be closer to children or move into retirement home, communities or stuff like that. And planned giving is an opportunity for them to remember the church, even if they're not actively involved in the church going forward. That's great.
All right, so are we ready for the next quiz? Are there other thoughts around money? For those of you who are familiar with Unitarian Universalist curriculum, you may know that there's Our Whole Lives is our curriculum around sexuality education. And studies show actually that for many people, money is a more difficult topic to talk about than sexuality, than issues around sexuality. So we're still learning how to talk about money, and we do have a curriculum. It's a Tapestry of Faith curriculum called the Wisdom Path, and it's kind of all about money and what money means and what makes giving and stewardship in our congregations a spiritual practice. So if you're looking for something to use to kind of help grease those difficult conversations around money, that may be a resource for you.
Excellent resource.
Yeah, that's fine. So do we want to move on to our next question, our next quiz?
Sure.
What is the difference between bylaws and policies?
And if you've read Hotchkiss, you've had the extra reading on this.
Come on, Michelle.
I told you I'm still confused. So
That's okay.
well, I mean, the way we obviously definitely have bylaws, which were set in place many, many years ago. And the bylaws to us just sort of lay out the overall structure, how we like to have ourselves structured. And then the policies are how each individual team or committee or board implement the things that we're doing, and the policies guide how we effectively do our tasks.
Great, and then there's that level, the next level down, which is procedures, which really can really get into the nitty-gritty of the how we do things in our congregations. Yeah, does anybody else have anything to add to that? That's great, Michelle. I think you've learned more from Hotchkiss than you think.
Well, I know that it's best practice with bylaws to make them general so that you have some flexibility, because you don't really want to be changing them very often, if at all. And then that goes down that same kind of domino effect. You don't change your bylaws, you rarely change your policies, you more frequently change your procedures and your process.
And bylaws will typically require a vote of the congregation for additions, deletions, changes, where a policy, the board is often empowered to create and implement policy.
Right.
and individual staff may be empowered to create and implement local procedures. So there's different areas of authority around each one of those as well. Yeah, Tom says bylaws are written and approved by the congregation.
And the higher level of trust that the congregation has in the board, the more you can have in policy rather than bylaws. So policies really have a lot of policies look a lot like bylaws, and there's things that are often that are in bylaws that might be in policy if there's a high level of trust of the board. But again, it has a lot to do with flexibility and like you want to have in your bylaws how you become a member or a voting member. And actually, we had a conversation among staff. One congregation was asking if a non-member could serve an elected position. And the bylaws should be clear about things like that. Like what are the rights and responsibilities of membership? That's really important to be in the bylaws. But other things like specifics around different committees, like naming all the committees in the bylaws isn't necessarily a good idea, but you might want to outline like the nominating committee in the bylaws, but your finance committee could be done in policies.
And sometimes bylaws, so, you know, the basic architecture of bylaws, the legal requirements for the bylaws are very small. You need to, you know, say when your annual meeting is. You need to say how you're going to elect officers. So the actual legal requirements of bylaws are fairly brief. But often we can do like a forensic kind of dig in a congregation to figure out where we can learn about their story. Like there might be a bylaw that says all staff members must have work hours during the week, and you know that's not really a bylaw. What that is an unresolved conflict in the congregation. So sometimes congregations use their bylaws to kind of set boundaries and set parameters, and really that's not the best use of a bylaw, because it does require the congregation to discuss and to discern and to vote. And that's not always the best use of your congregation's energy.
Good point.
Yeah.
So we have our last thing we're going to do today is I'm going to share a little case study with you and to see if you've experienced something similar. So I was sitting in on a board meeting a few years ago, and I noticed that what would happen is that the president would pretty much introduce things and people didn't really talk about them on the board, and then they would just vote. And then people on the board would vote no. Like it would pass, but there'd be 2 or 3 people who would vote no, but we never knew why they voted no. And so I, talked with the board president, and, I described what I saw, and I said, maybe I'm noticing that people are voting no and we don't know why. So here's another practice you can do. And so what I suggested is that the president, share whatever the proposal was, and to actually go around the circle and ask everyone's opinion before they voted on it. So really to have a discussion, but have a discussion in a way that created space for everyone's opinion. And so, fast forward another 5 or 6 months, and I went back to the board meeting, another board meeting. There were other things going on, but I'm just focusing on this process piece. I don't normally go to board meetings of my congregations, but once in a while I do, and this was a case where that happened. So anyway, I go to this board meeting, and the board had absolutely transformed, where the board members were engaged in a different sort of way, and there were things that they weren't really considering, as they were having their discussions before, because there really wasn't any discussion. So now they were making decisions with a little bit more information. Everybody was more engaged and leaning into the conversation because everyone's voice was being heard. And so and that the difference was just marked. And I realized that a board is not one person. A board is actually a group of people who are discerning together. It's like, and when we have a jury in a criminal trial, we don't have one juror who's sort of running things. The jurors all are together, and there's just a convener of the jury. I forgot what the role is, but they're just making sure that they, brings out the verdict and makes sure that things happen within the jury discussion. But our boards really are meant to operate in a similar sort of way, where the president or the moderator is the convener, but it's really the body as a whole that takes the responsibility and does the discernment. So I know that I've been on boards where I felt like I was the person who voted no, but nobody asked me my opinion. So I'm wondering if any of you have had experienced that. Being the voice that wasn't heard in the room?
I can't honestly say that would be me. But I will offer it's important to make sure that everyone is heard. And I have definitely been on groups where I've been the one who said, I haven't heard from Janie over there in the corner. I'd really like to hear your opinion. And I know not everyone is an extrovert, and the introverts in our group are very important. We need the opinions of everyone represented. And in our congregation, we have plenty of introverts. So you are speaking on behalf of someone else who may feel uncomfortable ever expressing their opinion. So yeah, as someone who I don't have a hard time communicating, but I do appreciate that people do. So, yeah, I think that it behooves the people who are comfortable doing that to make sure that everyone's included.
We don't. This is my 6th year on the board, so it's my last year. We have the possibility for 2 3-year terms. And I guess we've just been lucky that we haven't had such an introvert that wouldn't speak up. But we definitely have gone around at times and said, okay, before a vote, make sure that we've heard from everyone and checked into everyone. But we almost had the opposite problem recently, as we had somebody new join our board who happens to just be a very involved and passionate person, but kind of came in a little gangbusters, and really has a passionate project that they're interested in. And it created a bit of contention amongst this group that had been heretofore operating very civilly and, everyone being heard, etc. And I want to say at first it felt like a bomb had gone off in the middle of the room. And I, for one, I'm not an introvert, but I definitely don't like conflict. So it was very uncomfortable. We did end up redoing our covenant because of that. And I have to say, the end result is a much better situation for everyone. Even though I thought it was fine before, I think now it's that much better, because we are all on the same page, and any of the sort of inner grievances got aired. And I will say we reached out to our UUA or regional representative, and she was quite helpful. So I guess, yeah, it's all of those things, making sure everyone is heard, but also, even calming it down when when it's a little more rambunctious is just as important.
I'm seeing that Blaine wrote, we generally do not move on until all the voices have been heard and encourage quiet voices to speak.
Yeah.
And let's see, we have Pat asked do others have a board covenant? And Canandaigua does, and Kent does, and so does Arlington.
Mhm.
How
And
about Jamestown?
I like that Arlington says they do one when new board members come on. Sometimes we kind of think about the covenant as that, you know, it's a little bit cross-stitched and framed and put up over the table, but it's really, the group is dynamic and fluid.
Mm-hmm.
So.
In one of the later sections, I think we talk about, oh, maybe not. I get a little bit confused. We have the online Centered Leadership 1 and 2, which has a lot of other great information, and I'm not always remembering what's in what section. But one of the, I think we have an article. Anyway, there's this thing called the iceberg of culture, where there's like an iceberg, just part of it, you know, like 20% of it's above the water and the rest is below the water. And there's culture in each board of trustees. And so the covenant helps us to articulate what that culture is. So what some of the expectations are, and that can be really helpful with congregations. So, and what often happens is that you don't have a covenant, like Jamestown doesn't, which, you know, maybe you haven't needed one, but at some point something will happen and you're like, you know, maybe if we should have a covenant so this doesn't happen again. So that's often how covenants get started in congregations. There's a big conflict. And
yeah, and I would also say that, you know, we had, as you said, we did have a covenant. You know, had been written, I don't know, back in 2002 or something. And, you know, it got handed to each of us on a piece of paper when we joined the board. And when we went through this process this time, the new covenant looks nothing like the old one. So I like that idea of doing it every year or every time new board members come on, because I think the tenor and the tone and the verbiage of the covenant can be completely different based on the group, on the dynamics of the group.
Right.
I think the more you do covenant, the deeper it can get, because you see how it can create a container of where you can be in disagreement and still be at the table together.
Yeah, you know, I think initial covenants work with boards and other kinds of groups. You know, you kind of hit the high points, you know, okay, we're going to do active listening, and we're going to, you know, you kind of have these things that are really about sort of, you know, respectful relationship. But then as you know each other better, as you know the work better, you can take that covenant to another level, to a deeper level, where you're asking a little bit more of one another, but you're willing to commit a little bit more to the group and to the goals and the success of the board and the congregation.
Excellent. So I'm seeing it's, we've hit the 8 o'clock mark. We want to keep these to about an hour because we know they're all busy people. But we wanted to just spend a couple minutes to see what, to ask for your likes and wishes. What went well this evening and what you wish would have gone better. And you can type that in if you like, or email it to us afterward, or just share it verbally, whatever works for you.
I'll say so that everybody, now the people who are not seeing things, how are they getting the chat? The people who aren't.
They're all on their computers, but they don't have video cameras. So
Okay,
I think.
so you can still see the chat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. I like that we have a variety of church sizes. That's, I think, very helpful, very insightful.
I think it's just nice to, you know, start off getting to know, as Laura is saying, people from a wide variety of geography as well as size. And, you know, I anticipate that as we go forward, we'll get more and more into some meatier discussion and help. But my most favorite thing is being told these certain resources to go to. So thank you for that.
Oh, that makes my heart happy to hear that.
Yes.
So next time it's boards as spiritual leaders. So we are going to get a little meatier. This was more nuts and bolts. The first section on meetings and the fiduciary responsibilities. But that should be fun, and we should have more folks too. I know a lot of people had conflicts for tonight, so we should have a larger group. And I don't know that there was anything shared that if we shared this recording, would anyone? And did anybody share anything that they? Should stay in Vegas, as it were.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Great. Well, it was great connecting with you all, and you know, your primary contacts are always available to you. I wrote a note about administrators for Jamestown and Canandaigua, since you're my people.
Yeah, thanks.
So yes, please feel free to reach out for things like that. You know, we can always be thought partners if nothing else. So that's what we're here for. So thank you all, and we'll see you.
And we did record tonight. You know, we had said, I think in our promotion, that we wouldn't be recording just because we weren't sure about the kinds of stories that would be shared. But since this is the first time and there was a lot of introductions, I think we probably will send a link to a YouTube of this session. So if you want to look at it again or share it with somebody who was not able to be here, that would be okay.
Excellent. Hello, Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina.
Sorry we didn't catch you earlier. Hopefully we'll see you next time, and we'll make the link available. Awesome. So see you next month, and have a great fall. I hope you all staying warm. We had to turn on our furnace today, so.
Yes, we've got a bomb cyclone thing happening here in New Jersey.
Oh yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, you all. Take care.
Thank you.